Well, we have lots to talk about. We are switching over now to our guest, Dr. Abigail Favale, who is joining us now. She's a wife, mom, and author of this book from Ignatius titled The Genesis of Gender, a Christian Theory. Thanks so much for being with us, Abigail.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Let's get right into it. I guess the topic is constantly in the news. People have been voicing opinions either side. Maybe if you could start off with the basics. Why is it that we should not use the term gender and sex interchangeably?
Right. So that's a great distinction to make because much of the confusion around gender is being fueled by confusing terminology. So the words and definitions that are being used, and the definition of gender is constantly changing, constantly morphing. So many people are adopting the latest terminology without realizing that they're also absorbing an entire worldview that's behind that terminology. So when people use the terms sex and gender interchangeably, these changes or mutations of gender are then attributed to sex as well. In other words, what we say about gender then becomes true about sex, or people think that it's true about sex. And there are multiple definitions of gender, but two prominent ones that we hear a lot being used now are the idea that gender is a social construct, so that gender is simply the social norms that are attached to sex. And then gender is this inner subjective sense of self, this feeling within oneself. Now, those two definitions are, to start with, very different and even arguably contradictory, but something that unites them is that they're both grounded in something other than the body. So it takes gender away from the body. Now what's happening is then when gender is conflated with sex, then sex also becomes understood apart from the body. Sex itself becomes seen as something subjective, this inner feeling rather than an objective state of embodiment.
It's really interesting. And just even from speaking to you, you're clearly a very well-educated woman, very professional. So you have that academic background, but how has motherhood and your conversion influenced this journey as a writer, as an academic as well?
Right. So I did not grow up Catholic. I grew up an evangelical Christian. And then when I went to college, I became really interested in questions of gender and feminism. And I just sort of cannonballed into the deep end. And that became my worldview, my religion, really, for quite a long time. But then at the end of my 20s, I became a mother for the first time. And that really disrupted my neat and tidy worldview about what it means to be a woman, about whether gender really is a social construct or whether, in fact, our bodies are profoundly real and they very much shape who we are. And that incarnational longing drew me to Catholicism because Catholicism uniquely, I think, celebrates and preserves a sense that the body is sacred, that the body is meaningful, and that there's a spiritual meaning to the body that we need to attend to.
And as we said, too, there's so much confusion, Abigail, as well as we talked about. And is that why you decided to write this book at this time?
Well, that's funny. I actually started to write a different book. I started to write a book that was really just about Catholicism and feminism.
Okay.
But then as I started writing it, the chapter on gender just kept metastasizing. It was like 2 chapters, then 3 chapters, and then it began to kind of swallow the whole book. And so I reached out to my editor and I said, I think this is becoming a different book. And so the process of writing really gave birth to the book, what it became. And at the time, I wasn't even sure, there's a delay between when you finish writing a book and when it comes out. And I wasn't sure what the state of the question would be, a year from when I finished the book. But it's turned out to be even more timely, I think, because the conversation has really become more prominent, especially in the United States.
Absolutely, and I don't think it's going to stop becoming timely. I think everybody wants to talk about this. It's a super hot topic, which is why it's no surprise that it's been the subject of so many book clubs. How has that been for you?
It's been great. I've had, there's been a great response. People are reading it, and I think it's helping clarify. I think it's helping give people handholds and footholds to navigate this conversation because I have this background in this stuff, in gender theory, in feminist theory. And so now as a Catholic, I think I'm able to help other Catholics navigate what's happening. So yeah, it's been a great experience so far.
I love that, and I think especially using the book club format is perfect because it encourages people to speak with each other, especially with these really tender topics that feel very personal to people.
Yes.
Having in-person conversation allows that vulnerability and allows for really productive conversation, which we so often lose. So I think this is great. How can people get a copy of this book and follow your work further?
Sure. So Ignatius is the publisher, so the book's available directly from Ignatius or any kind of big box store like Amazon or Barnes and Noble, I believe. So yeah, and I also have a memoir if you're interested more in my conversion story. It's called Into the Deep, and that's also available on Amazon.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And